Hello friends, welcome back to Hebraic Creations. Last time we talked, I mentioned that we would uncover the roots of deception in the church. That can be traced back to ignoring Yehovah's words. So let's start off with the basics. The first 5 books of the Old Testament are called the Torah, which means instructions. It's kind of like the manuals that come with this expensive equipment. Unfortunately, most people ignore those. Do you know anybody like that? The Torah was written in Hebrew, and it's often misunderstood by Christians because most of us aren't taught from a Hebrew perspective, and so much meaning is lost in translation to English. Consider the word Shema. English-speaking people will probably define it to mean hear and obey. Shema is actually the name of the most important Hebrew prayer in the Old Testament. It starts out, "Hear, O Israel." Notice it is not hear and obey, O Israel. That's Deuteronomy 6:4, by the way. The reason why it's not hear and obey, O Israel, is because there is no word for obey in Hebrew. A California pastor named Chris Nye makes some very interesting points in his blog. He says that the Old Testament Hebrew simply did not differentiate between hearing and doing. Listening is inextricably linked to obeying. Wow, that is so different from our culture. We kind of like to do things our way, and we don't think the rules and laws should apply to us. Yet, Yeshua constantly said, if we love him, we would do what he commanded. His brother James even wrote in chapter 1, verse 22 and 25, "Be doers of the word and not hearers only, deceiving yourselves. He will be blessed in his doing." Take notice of that word deceiving right there. Not being a doer and hearer of the word is tied to being deceived. So you remember in the last video, I talked about the passages, or the passage in Deuteronomy 12, towards the end of that chapter, about not worshiping Yehovah the way pagans worship their deities. I used to think, well, that's not what Christmas and Easter means to me. Surely God knows I'm honoring the birth and resurrection of Yeshua. What harm is there in that? Besides, I couldn't recall any place in the Bible where someone was disciplined for having a celebration that was intended to honor the Creator, even though it may have had some pagan undertones. That is until I watched the Hosea's Christmas tree video from 119 Ministries. They reference Exodus chapter 32. That's where the Israelites make the golden calf and burn sacrifices, dance, and party. I'd always been taught that they were worshiping false gods there. However, the word gods in that verse comes from the Hebrew word Elohim, which could be false gods, or it could also mean Yehovah himself. This study took the perspective that the Israelites were not bowing down to false gods. They claimed that the people were worshiping the one who brought them out of Egypt. They were worshiping Yehovah. They knew who that was. Aaron made a golden calf because ancient Hebrew, or Paleo-Hebrew, was pictographic. And the picture for Yehovah was a bull's head. So it makes sense that he fashioned a golden calf. So if this is true, and they had not so quickly forgotten the one who brought them out of slavery, it's great that they were trying to honor Yehovah, just like we think we're honoring him with Christmas and Easter. It's not so great they were doing it the way the pagans worship their gods, by sacrificing to a golden statue. Do you see the parallel with the trees and the garlands and the mistletoe and the hams and colored eggs? The wayward Israelites were severely punished. 3,000 people died, and they were hit with a plague. This showed me how Jehovah has his way of doing things, and he isn't going to bend. Another example to consider, look at Exodus 17:6. Jehovah told Moses to strike the rock to bring forth water for the people. Then in Numbers 28, Jehovah told Moses to speak to the rock for a second round of water. Moses disobeyed and struck the rock. The first time he was allowed to strike the rock, the second time he was told to speak to it, but then he struck it instead. Jehovah mercifully brought forth water, but that little infraction cost Moses a lot. He was barred from the promised land. That's so harsh after wandering around in the desert with stiff-necked people for so long. Again, this shows how Jehovah expects his people to hear and obey, to Shema. Why is this so important? It's all about blessings and curses. If you look at Deuteronomy chapter 27 and 28, God wants us to enjoy his blessings, but they are contingent on our doing things his way. People today seem to want blessings without obedience. I know that was my mindset for a long time. But then when I exclusively observed the feasts of the Lord in 2019 and saw abundant blessings, I wanted to study the Old Testament and find more and more ways to honor him, to be blessed. But I also want to avoid the curses and the death and disease and destruction. Consider Deuteronomy 30, verse 19. I call heaven and earth as witnesses today against you, that I have set before you life and death, blessing and cursing. Therefore choose life, that both you and your descendants may live, that you may love the Lord your God, that you may Shema his voice, and that you may cling to him. For he is your life and the strength of your days, and that you may dwell in the land which the Lord swore to your father, to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, to give them. Who wouldn't want life, strength, and taking ground for the kingdom? Did you know that one of Jehovah's rules is that we do not add to or take away from his word? To do so is a serious offense. Look at Deuteronomy 4:2. You shall not add to the word which I am commanding you, nor take away from it, that you may keep the commandments of the Lord your God, which I command you. And then in Deuteronomy 12:32, it says, whatever I command you, you shall be careful to do. You shall not add to nor take away from it. And then in the New Testament, in Revelation 22:18 through 19, it says, I testify to everyone who hears the words of the prophecy of this book. If anyone adds to them, God will add to him the plagues which are written in this book. And if anyone takes away from the words of the book of this prophecy, God will take away his part out of the book of life and out of the holy city and from the things which have been written in this book. This is a clear warning. But did you know it has been ignored for centuries? We have been told the Bible is the inerrant word of Jehovah. But is it really? I want it to be. I want to follow the Father's words. But I'm responsible for knowing what those words are. And if the Father's words have been tweaked, I want to know about it. Don't you? Oh, we're going to look at how this has happened and where there are additions and omissions and who was behind it. Then we're going to see just how badly we have misunderstood Yeshua's ministry. This is going to get really good, so stay tuned. Shalom.